Here. All right, we're live. So here we are talking Big Bearded Nerdcast, talking Dungeons and Dragons. Got Big Bearded Nerd Norm here with us, and I got a special guest. Our friend Ron is here to talk. Ron is the king of Dungeons and Dragons. He's the old hand at all this, and we're just going to kind of talk about a few things Dungeons and Dragons related. Obviously, got the big 5th edition coming out this July. It's like July 15th, I believe, is when the starter set's going to come out, and then middle of August 19th, we're going to have the core rules released. We just want to talk briefly about how we got into playing tabletops and Dungeons and Dragons, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we're expecting with the new release coming this summer. So, Ron, since you've been out, just a little about yourself and how you got into playing.
Ron?
Did we lose him? I think we lost him. Well, this is an inauspicious start, wouldn't you say?
Perfect timing. Everything was great right up until we hit the record button.
Yeah. Well, then let's just go to Jake and see what Norm has to say.
All right. Well, yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, we just lost him.
I started playing. Am I still here? I just lost my picture.
Yeah, you're there.
Because I just lost my picture too.
Nope, I'm showing you.
All right. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons in, let's see, it would have been in the mid-90s when I was in the service. Prior to that, I had been taught that Dungeons and Dragons was evil, that you worshipped the devil and performed magic spells, and if your character died, you would probably die. At least that's what I was taught. So I didn't start playing until I got into the service. I got in with a good group of guys, and we were playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition. And I honestly don't know. I kind of want to get in touch with the guy. I'm friends with him on Facebook. My old army buddy that was our dungeon master. I don't know if we were playing homebrew, if he was running campaigns out of a box, or if it was kind of a combination. I know he was a really good dungeon master, running 3 of us players, plus he would usually, manage 1 or 2 non-player characters himself. And it's just, we would play on the weekend sometimes, all weekend long, in these marathon sessions, and I don't really remember rolling the dice or sitting around, writing stats down on paper. I remember the adventures. I remember hunting dragons, and I remember fighting the necromancer, and I remember, moving along the narrow path with lava bubbling up below us. It's the visceral memories of the descriptions of the scenes and everything that are what remain. And that was originally what drew me to it. I played a couple more times with a couple different groups, and you have different levels of success with that. And I played some other role-playing games too, like Star Wars and things like that. But that first, and that was probably the most that I played was when I was in the service. Just with a group of guys that we all had the passion for it, and we just enjoyed checking out a reality for a little bit.
Cool. Well, hey, it looks like Ron just got back to us here. Are you there now?
Yeah, that's perfect timing. As soon as you started recording, I just died on me.
Yeah. Well, your face was still up on the screen. We're like, Ron.
I look like that a lot.
Oh, that's all right. So yeah, actually your timing to pop back in worked out well too, because Jake just got done telling us how we got into D&D. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started?
Initially, it was probably maybe 1975, 76 or so, and a neighbor of mine, they were playing the old school, box set, and I was like, wow, that's kind of cool.
Just so you know, I was minus 2 years old that year, so.
Okay, all right. I was thinking about you. But then it was years later when I was in high school, and some friends were playing, and they were just, the one guy really was telling stories about hey, it's like, it's this and that. He was telling stories about like, this great campaign that he went on. And I still remember his first character he told me about it. His name was Balin, after the dwarf in the Hobbit,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a monk character. I'm like, that really sounds cool. So that's when I started playing, and it just really spoke to me, and especially once they opened up like Oriental Adventures and all that, I was like, oh yeah, I got to play a ninja, and it was great. I mean, and I think I heard Jake saying when I first come in, a little bit of time to disappear and escape from reality. And, it was great. I don't know what else to say. It was a lot of friends just hanging out and doing what was in our mind.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll say I had kind of a similar background, at least to what Jake said. I grew up in a Southern Baptist family, so anything Dungeons and Dragons was definitely, there's no way I was going to be playing that. I mean, I would have been drawn and quartered probably by my family. Same kind of thing, thing, and if you're going to sacrifice goats when you played, and that stuff just wasn't happening. I mean, it was always something that was interesting to me. I don't know. It's just I've always loved that fantasy and science fiction realm of imagination, and so I never got into it when I was young, and I wish I had, because I missed out on so much of that stuff growing up. But I wasn't until I got older and I got to the point where I was like, screw it, I'll do whatever the heck I want to do. But by that time, most of the people that I would have played with had kind of outgrown it and weren't playing anymore. So I really wanted to play from the time I was probably in my late teens to early 20s, but I didn't know anybody that played. And it wasn't until I met Jake, and we were hanging out, I just mentioned it. He's like, oh, dude, I play all the time. It's been a while since I played, but we got to get together. And then, we all got together and started playing our game last fall. So, I mean, I'm literally about 9 months into my D&D career at this point. But, so yeah. What would you guys say if you had like a favorite memory or like a favorite story to tell about your gaming days?
Just real quick, I'm sorry, I did hear Jake kind of saying about the whole, a little bit of afraid of admitting it. I'm actually still like that. I grew up in that era when it was like, oh, you're worshiping demons and you're doing this wrong. And even to this day, I still kind of, whenever I talk about it, I still feel hush-hush and ashamed, which really sucks. But I still have a hard time believing that people accept it as much as they do, and it just fascinates me.
Yeah.
Well, I think even aside from the religious persecution that Dwight and I talked about, you still, I think, for Ron and I, playing when we did, it was always considered, it was a thing that nerds did, and it just exemplified the fact that you were a nerd if you admitted to playing D&D. And now we're in this culture where all of these things that were taboo for us when we were young, they're now considered to be cool because of that very reason. Or, sometimes they get pulled in under the hipster umbrella, and I'm sure there's people out there that are playing D&D ironically or whatever, but I think I can speak for all three of us and say that we're all playing it because we genuinely enjoy it.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think you mentioned too, just getting lost in the stories and just the escapism. It's just kind of fun. I love that story creation. I love that being involved in stories, telling stories, and hanging out with friends too. I mean, I met some great guys last year through this. I know that's how I met Ron. It's how and a couple other guys we play with. We hang out and you get to share an experience together, which I think is always a good thing.
Well, I think you said favorite story. I kind of want to hear yours first, since you're the newest player amongst us. And you've only played the one campaign. We've been running with our group. We were running Keep on the Shadowfell from 4th edition, and it was kind of a box set, but also a little bit of homebrew because I added in some flavor because I'm our group's DM, our dungeon master, and I've added in some of my own twists to that. But in the 5 or 6 sessions that we played, what stood out to you as your big memory as your character, or as our group of characters, or even as a player?
Yeah, I think my favorite thing was, excuse me, was when I think it was our second session. Our first session, I guess Kenny had kind of thrown his character together at the last minute and didn't really like what he'd come up with. So in our second session, he'd written a new character, and then Jake, you had allowed him to you'd written in a way for his old character to wander out and his new character to wander in. I remember that we'd met some attractive female character in a bar where we were hanging out, and I remember Ron's character was hitting on her pretty hard at the end of that first session, and then we just kind of stopped, and he was still hanging out with her. So to start off the second session, I remember she gave Ron's character the cold shoulder, and then Kenny's character, she just walked upstairs with him, and he was like, "See you guys, I'm out," and that was the end of him. So that was just.
You guys still haven't found out what happened to him. He just kind of disappeared with the wood elf.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of fun. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of stories because we haven't played a whole lot, but that was definitely probably the most memorable part that we did. So.
And I'm sure Ron and I are both going to dig back deep into some of our previous sessions. But Ron, what about you? What's one of your favorite moments?
One of my favorite moments, and I think it really defined how I like to play, was quite a few years ago when I was still living in Traverse, and we had a group that we'd met like at least 1 to 2 times a week to play. And we were at our buddy's house, and my one guy, my barbarian, who I'm going to be revisiting here shortly, he got bit by a werewolf. And the guy's house that it was in, he wasn't doing much, so he's like, "I'm going to bed." So he went to bed, and me, the DM, and the other guy that was in, they had me locked in a cave behind these bars. It was like a cage or something, and because I was going to turn, and it was a good 35, 40 minutes of just pure role playing. There wasn't a dice roll, and to me, I still remember it was the best time that we ever had. It was like dude's asleep in his own house. We're sitting up, and I'm like, "Hey, let me out of the cage," and he's like, "No, you're gonna hurt people." I'm like, "I'm not gonna hurt people," and it. Just recounting it, I'm not doing it justice, and it sounds goofy, but it was the best time, and I mean that's what it was. There was no dice involved. It was storytelling and story living, and it was great. I mean, it really defined a lot. The relationship, not just between me and my friend, but between these two characters, and that's the time that really, really sticks out to me.
And Dwight, you've probably, I know you've experienced this because, in our other sessions playing with Ron. Ron is probably one of the best people I know to be able to just, like that, slip into role-playing. We're getting ready to start a new session, a weekly session at our office with some coworkers, some of whom are brand new to D&D, but Ron and I are playing. I'm DM, and for each character to kind of give them their hook into the adventure, I sat down with them for about 15 minutes and kind of went through a little scenario, and Ron just instantly inhabits his character and is instantly role-playing, and he's role-playing true to what his character's stats are. So if he's got a low intelligence or low wisdom or something like that, he's playing to that. So that's a compliment to you, running a session with you, Ron, that so I think you're going to make it easier for the new players because you slip instantly into that role-playing aspect that you almost forget that occasionally you have to roll the dice to see what happens.
So as long as we don't come out of it and I'm still in character and start cut people's heads off, that'd be bad. And the stereotypes win.
Right.
Or lose.
But for me, I think one of my most memorable sessions was with that group of guys I played with in the service. we had played for so long with our characters that we had leveled them up to the point that they were running a kingdom. The one guy had actually had a character die, so he had created a new character and decided he wanted to play a necromancer. And my buddy had just gotten the psionics book, and I had been reading that, so I'm like, I want to play a psionic. You know, instead of magic, it's all about powers of the mind. And I played my character in a way that he just abhorred magic. He didn't want anything to do with magic because it was from outside of the mind, outside of the body. And what happened was, because the player, my friend, blamed me for his previous character's death, his necromancer hated my psionic just because he was kind of metagaming. So we got into this big pissing contest in this inner sanctum place where it was basically he would cast a necromancer spell and I would cast a complementary psionic spell. So he would make dancing lights and I would magically make colored balls or with telekinesis fly around, and it just became this pissing contest of role-playing and dice rolls to see who could outdo the other, and ultimately realized that we're equally matched with magic and psionics. And
Nice.
and you know, it was a little bit of player versus player going on there, but in the end, we both knew how to handle our characters, and I think it helped us to get past that. The DM allowed us to do that to kind of so we wouldn't have any issues further on with our characters butting against each other.
Well, and I can say too, it's been fun for me to see, like, never having experienced the game before, to play with a group of guys like you that's got a good mix. And I mean, I know, Jay, this was your first time DMing, and I've really appreciated your ability to, think on the fly, come up with stuff as things have come up. I don't know. I've never felt like it really pulled us out of the game. Especially with a mixed group like that, where there was two of us that really didn't know what the hell we were doing, and then a couple of guys that were pretty experienced. So it never felt like, I mean, aside from when Steven was jumping beer on the table, it never really felt like we were. Felt like we were.
If I can raise my hand for a minute, I don't mean to quit.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
But Jake complimented me earlier. But by all means, before we even played, I think I knew Jake a good 3-4 years, and when this came up, I said, you have to be the DM because you are like the best storyteller I know, and no matter what, it's going to be good. You know, and I was right. You know, he can get into it. You know, granted, we had what every group goes through. We had a couple areas where, we had to hurry some things up, and it was a little bit rushed, but that was circumstances. It wasn't, it wasn't his fault, but he's a great storyteller. And, from what I know of you, Dwight, I'm very anxious to see what happens when you get to take the reins, because I know that you like to write and you like to tell stories. So, I've had my turn at DMing, and I'm the kind of person I hate reading, all that stuff. So it's like I tend to, whenever I DM, I just do stuff off the cuff and go. Oh, let's do this, let's throw that. I'm not saying I'm good at it. I will never claim that, but the storytellers make awesome DMs. So that's the next chapter I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that too. I want to play a little bit more before I actually try to lead the game. I'm not familiar enough with how the game works.
Oh yeah, very important.
Yeah, but no, I think that's more my style as being a DM than it is actually than playing would be. But we'll see. I get a few more games under my head, under my.
I have to, say thanks to Ron, because he really did convince me to be the DM, because I wasn't too sure about it. And Ron and I had actually talked about it for several months, to the point where Ron was like, "It's never going to happen." And it wasn't until we figured out we had enough people to play, and when you started to get involved too, Dwight, that we were like, you know what, we can really make this happen.
Yeah.
And of course, it took me a while to read up on the material and get familiar, because 4th edition was new to me, and that's, maybe that's a good transition. Why I'm excited about this 5th edition is there's a lot from what I've seen in the playtest that's very familiar because it harkens back to 2nd edition rules and 2nd edition stats and style of play, while still being accessible to 4th edition style of play as well. But this is the first time that I get to be a part of an edition of D&D from its inception.
Yeah.
So as the new material comes out, yet it's built in a world that's been formed over the last 30, 40 years. With it taking place in the home world of, or in Faerun in the Forgotten Realms and along the Sword Coast. It's, I don't know. I'm just excited to see, kind of go along with where it goes. I've been reading up on the lore of the Forgotten Realms and getting familiar with all that stuff. I've been spending, hours story crafting. We're getting ready to run a homebrew campaign, and once the official rules come out, I'm going to modify some of my stuff. But I'm sitting here making on paper, drawing these maps and things like that, and coming up with stats. I've been making, just today I spent a couple hours making a random trap generator, and I enjoy doing that stuff. I enjoy going into that world and kind of imagining, okay, what would happen when the players get into this situation, but also the story behind it, because as I craft this story for this homebrew campaign, I have the lore. I'm tying it into the Forgotten Realms, and I have kind of a general idea. I know what the beginning is. I know more or less what the middle is, and I know what the end is. But in between all that, it's up to the players.
Yeah.
That's why I can't like get right down to the nitty gritty and write everything, because I don't know what these characters are going to do, and they may take some twists and turns I never expected. And that's one of the challenges of being a DM, is you got to be able to think on your feet and say, there's no door here, but the big hulking barbarian breaks through the wall. And you weren't anticipating that. You got to be able to compensate for that in a way, in a way that doesn't feel like it's cobbled together. That feels natural, and But so as much as I'm excited about this homebrew stuff, I'm excited to see what the box sets and the package sets and adventures and stuff that Wizards is going to come out with for us to run through, and kind of hybrid tying the official lore in with the lore that our characters create for themselves.
Yeah. I know I'm one thing I'm kind of looking forward to, and you and I have talked about this a little bit too, is the getting away from the reliance on miniatures and the tabletop aspect of it, and getting more back to the pen and paper and getting inside your head with these stories. I mean, for me, Dungeons & Dragons was always the miniatures. I mean, that's what I always thought of when I thought, at least for the last few years. But the more I've looked into it and read into it and watched other people play online and talked with you guys about it, the more that's the stuff I really want to get into, is the stop worrying about what's on the table in front of you and start just crafting the story as you go. So that's one thing I'm kind of looking forward to, is playing a straight up pen and paper adventure, where there's no miniatures, there's no table. We've talked about having a game with some friends online in different states, so you can't even have a tabletop. You're literally just writing stuff down as you go and keeping track of it. And that's one thing I'm kind of looking forward to with the new editions. What about you, Ron?
No, that's awesome. But you couldn't have said it better, because Jake can tell you I've never been comfortable with 4th edition. Especially coming out of it. Biggest part of my life was advanced, and then 2nd edition, and then dabbling in 3rd edition for a little bit, where I DM'd a campaign. But 4th edition just felt too much like a video game to me. It was like, oh, I'm going to attack this guy, so I'm going to hit the A-B button back down 3 times. To me, that's what it felt like. fifth edition, it really seems like it's getting back to what D&D is, and I'm geeked about that. And knowing that you're excited about that, and I think you're really gonna enjoy it. You got a lot of good stuff coming towards you.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I enjoyed getting, learning what I did about fourth edition, I think you're exactly right, Ron. It felt very much like you had to figure out what button combination to press to activate which power and how often you could use it and how many squares away you were from somebody. Where what we played with second edition and what's coming with fifth edition, while it is accessible to that because you still have the, most of your distances and movement and spell effects are based in increments of 5, which is a common 5 feet is a common grid square on a battle map. You don't have to think in that way, and you don't think in terms of utility powers and encounter powers and daily powers. You have, based on your class and your skills, you have so many actions you can take during a turn. You can take a move, and then you can take an action, whether that's an attack, to cast a spell, to do some other thing, and then you have whatever your race and class powers allow, and if you can fit it into there. So it's not a matter of where your miniature is on the board, or what power cards you have and how often you can use that power. In terms of it relative to an encounter or a daily. It felt like there were too many stat blocks to keep track of as well. So I found, going from 4th edition prep to even with the playtest, it's just so much easier to prep for a game.
Yeah, and it really felt... Oh, go ahead, Ron, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It really felt to me like I was studying a book every time we had to, I was leafing through pages to determine what I was going to do next. It just seemed to be there was too much depth early on. I can see how as you level a character up and you get into the 20s, mid to upper 20s on level, where having a ton of stuff you guys capable of doing makes sense. But starting off from level 1, where you've got all these powers and all these things you can do, and having to remember what they all are and how they all work together and what you can and can't do on each turn. It seemed to me too complex for somebody that was supposed to be a novice beginner level 1. You should have been building that organically. So I'm hoping to see something like that. I don't know. That was one thing that I said. Jake, nothing you did took me out of the storytelling. But the way that game was set up, sometimes it just pulled me out because I was too busy trying to figure out what I was going to do next and not thinking about the story itself.
Yeah, when I got into 4th, it was like, to me, it felt like playing Diablo or something. It was like, okay, I gotta make sure my character is aiming down this skill tree, so I can take him this way or that. Where, me and Jake were talking the other day, and it was like, back when I was playing, it was more like, you want to go for your proficiencies, and this is what your character's doing, and this is how your character does it. It's more around your skills and your proficiencies, and what it really does is it brings the DM back into the game. It's not like, oh, well, my character has this ability and this ability, so he can do this, this, and this. It's, hey, you know what? Your character really specializes in this, so as a DM, yes, I'm going to let you pull this off, but not the other people, because you've really dumped you've taken the time to dump the stuff that you've earned, your points, your skills, your feats, whatever, into doing this, and that's what your character would do. Your character wouldn't do this just because that's the ability he picked up along this path to reach this end. This is what your character's doing now because of this.
Yeah.
And that, once again, just goes to saying you got to have a good DM. I mean, I was scared to death to play just because in our old group we had an awesome DM, and I was leery for a while to play just because I didn't know if I was going to be able to find somebody that was going to cater to the way I seen the game, and it's like character development, where it lets me get attached to a character. It's not just a piece of paper anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's really all we had on here to talk about. Either one of you have anything else you wanted to add today?
No, I think
anything else?
I think this is just the first of what will ultimately be probably regular conversations about Dungeons and Dragons, as we're all going to be invested in the new edition. I think we'll definitely, our listeners and our viewers can look forward to reviews of the new products as they come out, both from the DM and the player's point of view.
Yep.
And also some recounting of our own adventures as they take place. Because right now we can't really talk too much about specifics. I feel like our hands are bound a little bit, but I'm looking forward to what this new edition is going to bring.
Yeah, I am too. I think it's kind of exciting. Like I said, we'll have regular podcast updates. We'll have regular blog reviews and some recaps, that kind of thing, on the blog too. So check for those. But yeah, thank you, Ron, for sitting in. Obviously, you'll be back in multiple times in the future. So thanks, guys. Have a good night. Make sure you check us out on Twitter. I'm Big Bearded Nerd Ike at Kung Fu Ike, and we got Jake at Jake W Norman. Jacob W. Norman with 2 O's on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/BigBeardedNerds. So make sure you leave comments, questions. What are your thoughts on Dungeons and Dragons? What do you want to see us talk about next time? Thanks for listening, guys. We'll talk to you next week.